Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either Sikkim365.com or BaylorPlus.com today.
Welcome in to a bonus episode of Inside Baylor Sports. Today, I am here with the managing editor for WestVirginiaSports.com, Keenan Cummings. How's it going, Keenan?
Doing well. Hey, thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Of course. So I think the first question that I got to go with here, and I think it's a question on everyone's mind, is who's starting at quarterback for West Virginia this week?
Well, Neil is playing it very coy. He is trying to kind of leave this thing up in the air. I think my best read on the situation right now is you're probably going to see Garrett Green under center. I think that would be the case. You know, some of the keys here is Neil has always said he doesn't believe in guys losing their job by injury. That conversation, I think, becomes a little more interesting had Nico played a little bit better on the road at Cincinnati. Played very well against Arizona, kind of took a step back against Cincinnati, as you'll see with young quarterbacks every now and then. But Garrett's gotten reps in practice this week. My anticipation, whether you hear an announcement or not, is that he is going to be your starter. So we'll see, health willing, but I think that that's the direction that West Virginia would like to go. I think it gives them the most options offensively.
So I feel like I've heard a lot this week. West Virginia fans kind of feels like they want Nico to play over Garrett. I've seen a lot of that. I don't really have a specific take on that. I feel like Garrett's a little bit better, but what are your thoughts between the two?
I think it's a situation, I don't want to say love-hate, but Garrett has not played his best football at times this year. At times, looked fantastic. West Virginia does not win that game. They did not rally against Kansas without Garrett Green. You know, they do not go on the road and beat Oklahoma State the way they beat Oklahoma State without Garrett Green. I know Nico played in that game, but still, Garrett was very, very good. But he's also had moments where he's not looked as good. You know, he really struggled against Iowa State, struggled, you know, at times in the first half against Kansas State, and really has made some uncharacteristic plays. The one thing that Garrett did last year that really elevated his game was he didn't turn the ball over. You know, he only had 4 interceptions on the year. He passed that early in the season, you know, this year. And some of it was bad luck, you know, some bad bounces. But other times he was forcing the ball. He's not shown the ability to connect on the deep ball either, which was really kind of his calling card last year. He was one of the best in the country at throwing the deep ball, which is kind of surprising, you know, when you think about Garrett Green. It's not really what you think of, at least from a national perspective, but there he was, you know, throwing it very well. He had a ton of big-time throws if you look at Pro Football Focus. And this year, he's not been as accurate. They haven't been able to connect on those. And, you know, when teams are playing with so many people in the box, you know, to try to go against West Virginia's run game, you got to be able to hit some of those throws. And, you know, that leads to frustration from fans. And let's just be honest, guys. If your quarterback's not playing well, the most popular person on the team is a backup quarterback. It's always going to be that way. It's always everybody's answer to fix everything. But I just think when you look in totality, I think Nico has a very bright future here. But right now, Garrett Green probably gives you your best chance to win football games.
Yeah, so Keenan, I need you to dive a little bit deeper on these 20-plus yard throws, because I mentioned this in the article that I wrote for y'all. Garrett Green was unbelievable on those deep throws. I think 1,179 yards, 12 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions on 20-plus yard throws. I mean, he was outstanding. This year, he and Nico are at 518 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I mean, they've been not good at all in that regard. What's been the biggest difference there?
It's hard to really just missing it. You know, a lot of times it's been there. They've just not connected, you know, whether it's an accuracy pressure, you know, not pulling the trigger at times. It just has not been as successful. And I don't think it's an issue with the offensive line. I think that they've played pretty well in pass protection. Really, Garrett's just not been as accurate at that deep part of the field, or the deep part of the field, or even in the 10 to 20 range, which he was accurate at times last year. He's done a good job in, you know, some of the close stuff. And I think he he's ticked up his completion percentage a little bit, but that was a talking point, all summer, that they had to get better in that area. And they just haven't. I think it's been a big issue. If you're going to run the football as much as West Virginia, you want to be able to connect on the shot plays. It's a big part of their offense. You saw it last week. Nico was able to connect on some of those throws, those go balls against Cincinnati, and it made a huge difference for the offense. They were able to, go down, get in scoring position, and make people pay for playing man on you. Some of it is the receivers. They haven't been able to get as open against man. Now, that's gotten better as the season's gone along. I think you've seen some improvement there, but early in the year, that was a struggle. It was a struggle at times last year too, but they still were able to hit on those splash plays. It is something West Virginia needs and wants to do, and when they're not able to do that, it makes it a lot easier to defend them.
When I was kind of going through this, the group that I wanted to blame was the wide receivers. And I don't know if that's fair or not. I know they've had injuries, and so I'm sure that's a part of this, but how's that group? Is that a group that can really potentially exploit Baylor's secondary, or are there some concerns there?
They've been good and bad all in the same year. It's kind of funny because, they did have some turnover and they've had some injuries. They played last week without arguably their best receiver, Hudson Clement. He's a former walk-on, but not the type of guy you think of as a walk-on. Really fast, big guy, makes a lot of contested catches, and really can get open. Traylon Ray is their other guy that they've used a lot down the field. So they've had some production there. I don't think it's necessarily to the degree they want it to be at this point. But when you run the football as much as West Virginia, you just need those guys to make plays when they're called upon. And at times that's been an issue. At times it hasn't. I think the one thing about this group you want to see is they still have to prove they can consistently get open against man. That's been the talking point for the last 2 years. It's happened at times. Other times it's been a struggle. So you got to see consistency there. And really for West Virginia as a whole, we're 6 years into this Neil Brown thing, and consistency is the one thing that has been hard to find pretty much across the board.
Right. And you mentioned the run game a little bit. So I guess 2 questions on that. Jaheim White's great. Obviously, he might be West Virginia's best player. I think he's up there at least. But what's going on with CJ Donaldson? It feels like he's kind of just been an afterthought. Last week, barely played. Is he dealing with something, or just a true backup to Jaheim at this point?
No, they've used them both a lot this year. Last week, I think, was a little weird. West Virginia didn't have a lot of plays. I think they only ran like 42 plays because of the way that game went against Cincinnati. They had 2 defensive touchdowns. We're playing a lot of – Cincinnati had a lot of long drives. So I think that played a role. He was coming off an injury too. He got injured against Kansas State, and, he got cleared for the game, but still was dealing with an injury. But they want to use them both. Jaheim's that – as cliche as lightning and thunder type mix, but CJ has a big role in this team. They have to use him a lot to get him downhill and really get some physical yardage. So I think you're going to see him. They'll use him in the passing game too. He's a big guy, but he catches the ball well. He's a former tight end. So I'm sure by now people have heard that story. He never played running back before he got to college, and they stuck him at running back, and he's stuck there ever since. So they're going to use them both. It's a big part of their plan. They want to run the football. And, of course, if Green's starting or Markill's starting, whichever one, they're going to run with the quarterback as well.
So flipping over the defensive side, new defense coordinator calling plays against Cincinnati. What was the biggest thing that you saw last week that was maybe an area of encouragement?
It sounds so simple, and it shouldn't be happening 9 games into the season, but guys just being where they're supposed to be. Getting lined up, doing simple things. That was the biggest issue with West Virginia, under Jordan Leslie this year. At times, they were either late getting in the call, not being in the right spot. They had a few instances this year where one side of the defense was running one thing and the other side was running another thing. That just can't happen. And obviously, it didn't end well for West Virginia, as you could imagine. They gave up a 60-yard touchdown against Iowa State in a situation just like that. One half of the defense was running one call, the other half was running another, and a guy ran wide open. They actually had, for the half that wasn't playing the defense, had the call that would have stopped the play they ran. So just their luck. But I think that's something, this has been a unit that, for all their struggles, has stopped the run really well for the most part. There's a couple games where they let teams run on them almost because they didn't want them to throw on them. They played Kansas with a light box because they didn't want Jalen Daniels to get out and really hurt them. and make those throws on the edge. And against Pitt, really the quarterback escaping up the B gaps what hurt them more than anything. They did a really good job against their running back. For the most part, they've played really well against the run. It's been pass defense, and you can point to a lot of different things, drops with their linebackers and safeties just being not in the right spot, cornerbacks not making plays on the football. But I was encouraged from what I saw. Now, do I think that West Virginia is suddenly a steel curtain defensive unit? No. They still gave up a lot of yards and made some mistakes, but I do think that being in the right spot gives you a chance to get turnovers, and they had 3 against Cincinnati. You know how many they had coming into that game? 6. So if anything, being in the right spot gave them a chance to make some plays.
Definitely. That was a big turning point in that game, those turnovers. Do you view this as, I mean, I know you kind of answered this a little bit, but do you think this was more of a scheme coaching problem than a talent problem on the defensive side?
Scheme. I don't think it's necessarily a problem with the scheme because Jordan Leslie had more just getting stuff in, getting people in the right spots, just stuff that's easily fixable. And I don't understand, because Jordan knew it was a problem. I don't understand how it continued to happen. Obviously, it forced a change. The secondary isn't as strong talent-wise. See, not awful by any means. They've got some players. Maybe some of them haven't played up to potential this year, but they've done it in other spots. Some of the transfers they've brought in. I don't think it's a unit that's just devoid of talent. They've got some players up front. The linebackers have played pretty well, especially against the run. So, yeah, I would lean the former, if I'm saying it. I think it was probably more of a, getting the guys just consistency. That's the buzzword all week, for West Virginia last week was just be consistent. Just do the little things. Just do the things that play winning defense. And I think you saw some of that. And if you continue to see that, maybe the worm turns for this unit a little bit.
So you mentioned that West Virginia has been good against the run. But there's also been a couple performances that have stood out. The Penn State game, they gave up over 200. The Kansas game, it was like over 250. Cincinnati last week, if you take away the sacks, was at 185 yards rushing as well. Baylor's coming into this game, 3 straight games. They're averaging 285 yards on the ground. What's your expectation for West Virginia as far as it goes, trying to stop Baylor's run game? Do you have a number in mind that you feel like they can hold Baylor to?
I think really it depends how West Virginia plays them. They came in, they weren't going to let Kansas State run the football, and they absolutely shut Kansas State down. Same thing for a couple other teams on the schedule. If they're going to play it kind of like they did, Kansas, more of a lighter box, which I don't know why they would. I would try to stop the run first with Baylor. I think that they obviously have a good quarterback that can throw the ball, but it's going to be a key to me. I think if West Virginia is able to knock them off schedule a little bit, force them behind the chains, they've got a much better chance in this game. I think if Baylor's able to run the football, really, I think you can flip this to both teams. Whichever team wins the line of scrimmage is probably going to have the most success in this game. In terms of yardage, I think, you never know with that. You pop one big run. You look back at that. You mentioned the Penn State game. West Virginia did a really good job. There were 2 or 3 runs in that game that really bolstered. I know you can't take runs out. It's part of what happened. But, a 60-yard run gives you a ton of yards that you necessarily weren't going to have without it. So can West Virginia stop the big play, I think, is a key. If they hold them under 120 yards rushing, I think it's going to be a really good day for them. Just by the nature of how college football works, you're going to have some quarterback runs and some other things. That's where West Virginia's been hurt a lot at times. It's gotten better as the season's gone along, but you even saw it last week with Brendan Sorsby a little bit. He was able to make plays kind of off schedule with his feet. It killed him against Pitt earlier in the season. Even Penn State, Drew Aller isn't known for being the most fleet of foot guy, and he was able to pick up quite a bit of yards with his feet. Now they've gotten better at times, but I think that'll be key. You put all that together though. If they hold Baylor under 120 yards, I think that's a really good day for the West Virginia defense.
Definitely. So as far as the passing game goes, for Baylor against West Virginia's secondary, where's the area that West Virginia's gotten attacked the most? Is it in the slot? Is it tight ends? Is it wide receivers? Where are they most susceptible to giving up big plays, first downs, things like that?
if you throw out all the busts, which like for the most part, they did a really good job against that last week. It's those areas kind of where linebackers are dropping in the middle of the field and safeties are covering. That's where teams have had a lot of success. I mentioned that Kansas State game. They did a good job on the outside, but they just gave Avery Johnson those easy access throws, basically like 8-9 yard handoffs, and then guys would catch it and run about 5 more yards. First down. So they did a better job for the most part against Cincinnati. And some of that is, again, just getting where your drop needs to be, being in the right spot. So if they do that, I think they'll be better. But those plays have been the biggest issues. It hasn't necessarily been, the corners can't cover anybody, or, it's been more zone defense than it has man. And West Virginia did use some man last week. Not a lot, but they used it and did a pretty good job for the most part. So we'll see how it continues to go, but it's until proven otherwise, it's an issue for West Virginia.
So big picture wise, Neil Brown, I know, has gotten a lot of criticism from West Virginia fans. A lot of it is probably fair. But last year they had a really good year, and you come into this year and there's a lot of expectations, and they still can kind of meet those expectations, shockingly. How big of a game do you think this is for Neil Brown and for this program on Saturday as they look forward into a schedule that is relatively easy? I mean, not easy, but there's winnable games going forward if they can get by this Baylor game. How big is it for the program and for Neil Brown?
If you follow West Virginia, it feels like we have this question every week almost. Yeah. Is the Cincinnati game a big game? Is Iowa State? They're all big for Neil Brown at this point. The difference between some of the fan base and the administration is quite large at this point. Can that change? Yes, winning cures everything. You look at last year, there were people that were out on Neil Brown when they lost to Houston on a Hail Mary. By the end of the season, they were right back in the boat. Winning cures everything. Can West Virginia finish this season 8-4 and maybe have a chance to win 9 games 2 years in a row? I mean, if you do that, regardless of how you feel about the offensive philosophy or Neil Brown as a coach, if you can't enjoy winning to a certain degree, why are you a fan? Is kind of the way I look at it. And I think that there's a chance for West Virginia. Yeah, it's a big game. Baylor's a good team. Yeah, they've been playing really good football of late. But you get them at home. You get them in a matchup that on paper you have a chance to defend them. This isn't necessarily a team that's been known to throw the football all over. They can throw the football, but I think it's a matchup favorable for what West Virginia does on defense. But you got to come up with answers, and it's not going to be easy. Because if Baylor is able to run the football to any degree, I think it's going to be a long day for West Virginia, especially at the high clip they have the last 3 weeks. And Neil Brown needs to find answers. You need to win one of these games at home, too. West Virginia is a home underdog in this game, which I would say it'd be close to a pick 'em for me, truthfully. But, you're a home underdog in this game. If you lost 2 games in a row at home, really in embarrassing fashion. Now, one of them, against Kansas State, they pretty much lost most of their good players to injury at halftime in a close game. But you need to find a way to win these games. If you want people to trust the climb, which is the quote here that they keep saying, you need to give them some reason to do that.
Absolutely. Okay, so give me your biggest offensive key, biggest defensive key, and then your score prediction for this weekend.
Outside of the obvious, turnovers, mistakes, all that stuff, I think it's simple, and I touched on this a little bit earlier. I think the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. Can West Virginia run the ball? Can West Virginia stop the run? If they do those 2 things, I think West Virginia will win this game. If they don't, I think Baylor will win this game. It really comes down to that for me. I think that Baylor can make plays through the air, and I think they'll probably go to that a little bit. I could see them coming out throwing the ball to try to open up the run, depending on how West Virginia plays them. But yeah, that's here or there. I think that just based on history, and I think it does matter. I know it doesn't matter in the terms of it's going to affect this game, but West Virginia's found ways to win these games against Baylor, even when they've had the better teams. And I think that if they're able to come out and play similarly to how they played the last 2 weeks and really kind of play better defense, really, I think West Virginia can win this game. I have this, my fans, people that follow me are going to laugh, but it's almost like a coin flip because that's what West Virginia's been really for most of the year. Outside Penn State, I would say pretty much most of their games are a coin flip, and I think this is going to be much of the same. I'll take West Virginia, 34-31, but I could easily see it being Baylor 37-30. I mean, I think it's going to be a high-scoring game both ways, though. I would be very surprised if this game isn't in the upper 20s, 30s.
Awesome. Okay, so I do got to ask you, for Baylor fans that are coming to West Virginia, give me like a restaurant, bar, whatever that they need to go to, and then maybe a thing to do that they need to do if they have an extra day in Morgantown.
Oh man, there's all kinds of stuff to do here. You really wouldn't be, you'd be surprised just for a little college town. But I'm a big Mario's Fishbowl guy. Love it. I recommend going to the older location. You can ask around. It's on Richwood. There's a newer location though, closer to the stadium. But that's a great place. Kegler's is a great sports bar. There's a lot of different spots to eat around town. There's a lot of hiking. You can go to Cooper's Rock and a couple other things. Just to see the town. You know, I recommend everybody, if you've never been to Morgantown before, just go downtown, you know, the night before the game. It's a really cool small city vibe, and really just the place comes alive. You know, there is a ton of people coming into Morgantown for these games, and you'll have a lot of fun. You know, I know that people I've talked to that have made the trip from a lot of schools, you know, there were horror stories about West Virginia in the Big East from a lot of their old rivals, and you'll find out a lot of that's just kind of, you know, people are very accommodating, and you'll have a great time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Keenan, for joining today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Enjoy the weekend, and Sic 'em Bears.